Are you ready to hear all about ancient Egypt's most depraved pharaoh? You see, most pharaohs built temples, yet this one built prisons. Most pharaohs wanted to be remembered for peace or power, but this one wanted to be feared. He slaughtered thousands. He starved towns. He enslaved whole tribes. And then he told everyone to write it down. But that's not even the worst of it. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Recorded atrocities. I captured their women, set fire to their grain. No, that's not a modern historian describing a war crime. That's Senusret III writing about himself. This comes from one of his boundary stelae, set up along Egypt's southern frontier, specifically the year 16 Semna Stella, and the language is unsettlingly blunt. To be more specific, he says, I captured their women. I carried off their dependents. I went to their wells, killed their cattle, cut down their grain, set fire to it. Not exactly understated, is it? Aside from crushing resistance, he was wiping out entire communities, burning homes, torching fields, taking prisoners. And just in case someone thought he was exaggerating, he ends the inscription with, I speak truthfully. There is no boast. Charming. And it wasn't a one-off. Other texts, like one from a priest's tomb under Amenemhat I, Senusret's predecessor, brag about similar campaigns. The Nubians of the entire remaining part of Wawat were slaughtered. I put fire into their houses. And so Senusret didn't dial it down. Instead, he doubled down. He rebuilt and reinforced frontier forts to dominate the region. The strategy was clear. Strike fast, strike hard, and leave nothing standing. Graffiti from soldiers stationed there, along with archaeological reconstructions, show the same cycle. Villages attacked, people enslaved or killed, and leaders singled out for punishment. One inscription calls Senusret merciless to the enemy who attacks him, and proud of striking first. It says he refused to let enemies recover, so once pushed back, that was it. No regrouping and no second chances. And then there's the Semna Decree, partially damaged, but still legible enough to get the point across. There is no tomb for him who rebels against his majesty. His body is thrown into the water. Yeah. If you rebelled, not only were you executed, but you were also denied a burial, denied the afterlife, and then you got dumped in the Nile. And that's as bad as it gets in ancient Egypt. All of it, though. These stelae, tomb texts, decrees, it all adds up to one thing. This was state terror. Deliberate, public, and meant to keep everyone in line. The Bowmen. All right, so let's talk about who actually bore the brunt of Senusret III's rage. Without beating around the bush, it was mostly Nubians, whole communities of them. Egyptian records call them Bowmen, a nickname that sounds kind of cool, until you realize it's basically shorthand for enemy target. One temple hymn at Abydos straight up brags that he slaughtered thousands of bowmen. And again, the stele talks about capturing women and dependents too. So we're likely looking at civilians, families, dragged away, enslaved, or killed. Intentional targets, not collateral damage. But he didn't stop there. He burned crops. He poisoned wells. That's basically how you engineer famine. And, invite in a lovely, bonus round of disease. Inside Egypt's southern border zone, any hint of rebellion got stomped out quickly, and in a very, very ugly manner. And we don't see signs that he targeted ordinary Egyptians or the priesthood. He wasn't that kind of pharaoh. For instance, he wasn't out smashing temples or torching statues. But if you were a Nubian or a suspected sympathizer, oh, his mercy had limits. And those limits were mostly non-existent. Later, Egyptian writers and Greek historians kind of sidestep this part. Probably because, well, pharaohs liked their propaganda clean. They didn't advertise atrocities, unless they could dress them up as victory. But the older records name the acts. They describe the brutality, and this was quite specific, to say the least. So yes, they wrote it down because they wanted it remembered. Behind the curtain. Again, all this dark history actually comes from the evidence that's carved, stamped, scribbled, and buried right in the ground. For instance, the stone stelae at Semna and Bowmen were boundary markers, big slabs of stone that were covered in hieroglyphs and set up on Egypt's southern frontier. Senusret III had them carved himself, and the message was loud and clear. We're here, we're armed, and we're not playing around. Then there are the temple hymns, just like that hymn we mentioned earlier, from the cult of Kakaure, which celebrates how he brought death to thousands of Bowmen. And on a side note, Kakaure was Senusret's throne name. But yeah, that massacre was basically state-approved murder, passed off as divine will. The hymn even compares his arrows to the goddess Sekhmet, lioness of war and plague. So in that worldview, mass killing was both allowed and sacred. Then we also have the paperwork. Tomb inscriptions, admin records, officials bragging about their own role in the violence. There's one from a guy named Ameni. He worked under Senusret I, Senusret III's predecessor. But the tone is the same. It shows us how Nubian nobles and local leaders didn't escape the depraved pharaoh's wrath either. He boasts about forcing Nubian leaders to wash gold ore for the crown in the middle of the desert. And the text adds, casually, almost like a footnote, that Senusret III was even harsher. So these sources confirm that Senusret III kept the same policies rolling, just with more force. Even the fortresses themselves, at places like Bowmen and Semna, back all this up. Archaeologists found seal impressions with images of people locked in cages. So it's not exactly a mystery. And it's not proof of a fair trial either. That's for sure. It fits the bigger picture of mass imprisonment, forced labor, and punishment on a terrifying scale. But let's lift the lid a bit. You see, Senusret III wasn't some religious zealot on a divine mission. He didn't ban gods or tear down temples. He wasn't an Akhenaten storming into the priesthood and rewriting the cosmos. No, Senusret's violence was coldly political and military. He used state brutality the way other kings used rituals. When his inscriptions say things like, "As my father, Ptah, lives for me," it's sort of like a PR move, not heartfelt piety, a way to dress up border terror as divine justice. And although he didn't desecrate temples or trash Egyptian traditions, he did violate something just as sacred. The moral order that said, the dead deserve dignity. Yes, remember what we mentioned earlier about rebels not getting buried? Well, as you're already aware, Egyptians believed in careful burial, preservation, and ceremony. Senusret, however, threw bodies in the river. He refused tombs for rebels. He stripped whole communities of rights and recognition. So that's not just cruelty by our standards. That was cruelty by his own people's standards. He drew a line. Some lives, worthy of rituals, but others tossed aside. And the fury behind it all wasn't subtle. Anyone labeled an enemy, whether it was a captive, child, or maybe just unlucky, they were all fair game. Now, to be fair, other pharaohs also had their moments. Akhenaten, again, claimed he impaled 225 Nubians, which was not exactly merciful. But even that looks like a one-off chest thump. Senusret, as we talked about already, left piles of records. Detailed, systematic, disturbingly proud. Then there was Thutmose III, the famous conqueror. He never bragged about killing women and children. He never banned tombs for rebels. Like his, most royal victories were vague, proclaiming stuff like, "We triumphed," "The enemy fled," that sort of thing. So, in the end, what does this all say about power? Well, in Senusret's Egypt, fear was the message. Violence was policy, and legacy. Legacy didn't matter if it was built on terror, as long as it was remembered. After all, he made sure the story got carved in stone. And that's what some might call control, while others might call it propaganda. Either way, it worked.